Section 17 of the World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. The Second Oration Against Mark Antony by Cicero, Part 2. O miserable man! If you are aware, more miserable still if you are not aware, that this is recorded in writings, is handed down to men's recollection, that our very latest posterity in the most distant ages will never forget this fact, that the consuls were expelled from Italy, and with them Cnaeus Pompeius, who was the glory and light of the empire of the Roman people, that all the men of consular rank, whose health would allow them to share in that disaster and that flight, and the praetors and men of praetorian rank, and the tribunes of the people, and a great part of the senate, and all the flower of the youth of the city, and, in a word, the republic itself, was driven out and expelled from its abode. As then there is in seeds the cause which produces trees and plants, so of this most lamentable war you were the seed. Do you, conscript fathers, grieve that these armies of the Roman people have been slain? It is Antonius who slew them. Do you regret your most illustrious citizens? It is Antonius again who has deprived you of them. The authority of this order is overthrown. It is Antonius who has overthrown it. Everything, in short, which we have seen since that time, and what misfortune is there that we have not seen, we shall, if we argue rightly, attribute wholly to Antonius. As Helen was to the Trojans, so has that man been to this republic, the cause of war, the cause of mischief, the cause of ruin. The rest of his tribuneship was like the beginning. He did everything which the Senate had labored to prevent, as being impossible to be done consistently with the safety of the republic. And see now how gratuitously wicked he was in accomplishing his wickedness. Then, in this same tribuneship, when Caesar, while on his way into Spain, had given him Italy to trample on, what journeys did he make in every direction? How did he visit the municipal towns? I know that I am only speaking of matters which have been discussed in every one's conversation, and that the things which I am saying and am going to say are better known to everyone who was in Italy at the time than to me, who was not. Still, I mention the particulars of his conduct, although my speech cannot possibly come up to your own personal knowledge. When was such wickedness ever heard of as existing upon earth, or such shamelessness, or such open infamy? The tribune of the people was borne along in a chariot, lictors crowned with laurels preceding him, among whom, on an open litter, was carried an actress, whom honorable men, citizens of the different municipalities, coming out from their towns under compulsion to meet him, saluted not by the name by which he was well known on that stage, but by that of Volumnia. Footnote. A note to Mr. Huge's translation explains that this woman was a courtesan who had been enfranchised by her master Volumnius, and that the name of Volumnia was dear to the Romans as that of the wife of Coriolanus, to whose entreaties he had yielded when he drew off his army from the neighborhood of Rome. End footnote. A car followed full of pimps, then a lot of debauched companions, and then his mother, utterly neglected, followed the mistress of her profligate son as if she had been her daughter-in-law. Oh, the disastrous fecundity of that miserable woman! With the marks of such wickedness as this did that fellow stamp every municipality and prefecture and colony, and in short the whole of Italy. When victorious, you returned with the legions from Thessaly to Brundusium. There you did not put me to death. It was a great kindness, for I confess that you could have done it, but there was no one of those men who were with you at that time who did not think that I ought to be spared. For so great is men's affection for their country, that I was scared even in the eyes of your legions, because they recollected that the country had been saved by me. However, grant that you did give me what you did not take away from me, and that I have my life as a present from you, since it was not taken from me by you. Was it possible for me, after all your insults, to regard that kindness of yours as I regarded it at first, especially after you saw that you must hear this reply from me? You came to Brundusium, to the bosom and embraces of your actress. What is the matter? Am I speaking falsely? How miserable is it not to be able to deny a fact which it is disgraceful to confess? If you had no shame before the municipal towns, had you none even before your veteran army? For what soldier was there who did not see her at Brundusium? Who was there who did not know that she had come so many days' journey to congratulate you? Who was there who did not grieve that he was so late in finding out how worthless a man he had been following? Again, you made a tour through Italy with that same actress for your companion. Cruel and miserable was the way in which you led your soldiers into the towns. Shameful was the pillage in every city, of gold and silver, and above all, of wine. And besides all this, while Caesar knew nothing about it, as he was at Alexandria, Antonius, by the kindness of Caesar's friends, was appointed his master of the horse. Then he thought that he could live with Hippia by virtue of his office, and that he might give horses which were the property of the state to Sergius the buffoon. At that time he had selected for himself to live in, not the house which he now dishonors, but that of Marcus Piso. Why need I mention his decrees, his robberies, the possessions of inheritances which were given him, and those too which were seized by him? Want compelled him. He did not know where to turn. The great inheritance from Lucius Rubrius, and that the other from Lucius Tursilius, had not come to him. He had not yet succeeded as an unexpected heir to the place of Cnaeus Pompeius, and of many others who were absent. He was forced to live like a robber, having nothing beyond what he could plunder from others. However, we will say nothing of these things, which are acts of a more hardy sort of villainy. Let us speak rather of his meaner descriptions of worthlessness. You, with those jaws of yours, and those sides of yours, and that strength of body suited to a gladiator, drank such quantities of wine at the marriage of Hippia that you were forced to vomit the next day in the sight of the Roman people. Oh, action disgraceful not merely to see, but even to hear of! If this had happened to you at supper amid those vast drinking cups of yours, who would not have thought it scandalous? But an assembly of the Roman people, a man holding a public office, a master of the horse, to whom it would have been disgraceful even to belch, vomiting, filled his own bosom, and the whole tribunal with fragments of what he had been eating, reeking with wine. But he himself confesses this among his other disgraceful acts. Let us proceed to his more splendid offenses. Caesar came back from Alexandria, fortunate, as he seemed at least to himself, but in my opinion no one can be fortunate who is unfortunate for the Republic. The spear was set up in front of the temple of Jupiter Stator, and the property of Cnaeus Pompeius Magnus. Miserable that I am, for even now that my tears have ceased to flow, my grief remains deeply implanted in my heart. The property, I say, of Cnaeus Pompeius the Great was submitted to the pitiless voice of the auctioneer. On that one occasion the state forgot its slavery and groaned aloud, and though men's minds were enslaved, as everything was kept under by fear, still the groans of the Roman people were free. While all men were waiting to see who would be so impious, who would be so mad, Who would be so declared an enemy to gods and to men as to dare to mix himself up with that wicked auction? No one was found except Antonius, even though there were plenty of men collected round that spear who would have dared anything else. Footnote: Mr. Young observes that the custom of erecting a spear wherever an auction was held is well known. It is said to have arisen from the ancient practice of selling under a spear the booty acquired in war. End footnote. One man alone was found to dare to do that which the audacity of everyone else had shrunk from and shuddered at. Were you then seized with such stupidity, or should I rather say with such insanity, is not to see that if you, being of the rank in which you were born, acted as a broker at all, and above all as a broker in the case of Pompeius's property, you would be execrated and hated by the Roman people, and that all gods and all men must at once become and forever continue hostile to you. But with what violence did that glutton immediately proceed to take possession of the property of that man to whose valor it had been owing that the Roman people had been more terrible to foreign nations, while his justice had made it dearer to them. When, therefore, this fellow had begun to wallow in the treasures of that great man, he began to exult like a buffoon in a play, who has lately been a beggar, and who has become suddenly rich. But as some poet or other says, ill-gotten gains comes quickly to an end. It is an incredible thing, and almost a miracle, how he, in a few, not months, but days, squandered all that vast wealth. There was an immense quantity of wine, an excessive abundance of very valuable plate, much precious apparel, great quantities of splendid furniture, and other magnificent things in many places, such as one was likely to see belonging to a man who was not indeed luxurious, but who was very wealthy. Of all this, in a few days, there was nothing left. What Charybdis was ever so voracious? Charybdis, do I say? Charybdis, if she existed at all, was only one animal. The ocean, I swear most solemnly, appears scarcely capable of having swallowed up such numbers of things, so widely scattered and distributed, in such different places, with such rapidity. Nothing was shut up, nothing sealed up, no list was made of anything. Whole storehouses were abandoned to the most worthless of men. Actors seized on this, actresses on that. The house was crowded with gamblers and full of drunken men. People were drinking all day, and that too in many places. There were added to all this expense, for this fellow was not invariably fortunate, heavy gambling losses. You might see in the cellars of the slaves couches covered with the most richly embroidered counterpanes of Cnaeus Pompeius. Wonder not, then, that all these things were so soon consumed. Such profligacy as that could have devoured not only the patrimony of one individual, however ample it may have been, as indeed his was, but whole cities and kingdoms. And then his houses and gardens. Oh, the cruel audacity! Did you dare to enter into that house? Did you dare to cross that most sacred threshold, and to show your most profligate countenance to the household gods who protect that abode, a house for which a long time no one could behold, no one can pass by without tears? Are you not ashamed to dwell so long in that house, one in which, stupid and ignorant as you are, still you can see nothing which is not painful to you? When you behold those beaks of ships in the vestibule, and those warlike trophies, do you fancy that you are entering into a house which belongs to you? It is impossible. Although you are devoid of all sense and all feeling, as in truth you are, still you are acquainted with yourself, and with your trophies, and with your friends. nor do I believe that you, either waking or sleeping, can ever act with quiet sense. It is impossible but that, were you ever so drunk and frantic, as in truth you are, when the recollection of the appearance of that illustrious man comes across you, you should be roused from sleep by your fears, and often stirred up to madness, if awake. I pity even the walls and the roof. For what had that house ever beheld except what was modest, except what proceeded from the purest principles and from the most virtuous practice? For that man was, O conscript fathers, as you yourselves know, not only illustrious abroad, but also admirable at home, and not more praiseworthy for his exploits in foreign countries than for his domestic arrangements. Now, in his house every bedchamber is a brothel, and every dining room a cook-shop. Although he denies this, do not make inquiries. He is become economical. He desired that mistress of his to take possession of whatever belonged to her, according to the laws of the 12 tables. He has taken his keys from her, and turned her out of doors. What a well-tried citizen, of what proved virtue is he! The most honorable passages in whose life is the one when he divorced himself from that actress, though you yourself took no personal share in it. Partly through timidity, partly through profligacy, you had tasted, or rather had sucked on, the blood of fellow citizens. You had been in the battle of Pharsalia as a leader. You had slain Lucius Domitius, a most illustrious and high-born man. You had pursued and put to death in the most barbarous manner many men who had escaped from the battle, and whom Caesar would perhaps have saved, as he did some others. And after having performed these exploits, what was the reason why you did not follow Caesar into Africa, especially when so large a portion of the war was still remaining? And accordingly, what place did you obtain about Caesar's person after his return from Africa? What was your rank? He whose quaestor you had been when general, whose master of the horse when he was dictator, to whom you had been the chief cause of war, the chief instigator of cruelty, the sharer of his plunder, his son, as you yourself said, by inheritance, proceeded against you for the money which you owed for the house and gardens, and for the other property which you had bought at that sale. At first you answered fiercely enough, and that I may not appear prejudiced against you in every particular, you used a tolerably just and reasonable argument. What, does Caius Caesar demand money of me? Why should he do so any more than I should claim it of him? Was he victorious without my assistance? No, and he never could have been. It was I who supplied him with a pretext for civil war. It was I who proposed mischievous laws. It was I who took up arms against the consuls and generals of the Roman people, against the Senate and people of Rome, against the gods of the country, against its altars and hearths, against the country itself. Has he conquered for himself alone? Why should not those men, whose common work the achievement is, have the booty also in common? You were only claiming your right, but what had that to do with it? He was the more powerful of the two. Oh, how splendid was that eloquence of yours when you harangued the people stark naked! What could be more foul than this, more shameful than this, more deserving of every sort of punishment? Are you waiting for me to prick you more? This that I am saying must tear you and bring blood enough, if you have any feeling at all. I am afraid that I may be detracting from the glory of some most eminent men. Still, my indignation shall find a voice. What can be more scandalous than for that man to live, who placed a diadem on a man's head when everyone confesses that that man was deservedly slain, who rejected it? And moreover, he caused it to be recorded in the annals under the head of Lupercalia that Marcus Antonius, the consul by command of the people, had offered the kingdom to Caius Caesar, perpetual dictator, and that Caesar had refused to accept it. I now am not much surprised at your seeking to disturb the general tranquillity, at your hating not only the city but the light of day, and at your living with a pack of abandoned robbers, disregarding the day and yet regarding nothing beyond the day. For where can you be safe in peace? What place can there be for you where laws and courts of justice have sway, both of which you, as far as in your lay, destroyed by the substitution for kingly power? Was it for this that Lucius Tarquinius was driven out? That Spurius Cassius and Spurius Maelius and Marcus Manlius were slain? That many years afterward a king might be established at Rome by Marcus Antonius, though that bare idea was impiety? However, let us return to the auspices. Oh, what a splendid progress of yours was that in the months of April and May, when you attempted even to lead a colony to Capua! How you made your escape from thence, or rather how you barely made your escape, we all know. And now you are still threatening that city. I wish you would try, and we should not then be forced to say barely. However, what a splendid progress of yours that was! Why need I mention your preparations for banquets? Why your frantic hard drinking? Those things are only an inquiry to yourself. These are injuries to us. We thought that a great blow was inflicted on the Republic when the Campanian district was released from the payment of taxes in order to be given to the soldiery, but you have divided it among your partners in drunkenness and gambling. I tell you, O conscript fathers, that a lot of buffoons and actresses have been settled in the district of Campania. Why should I now complain of what has been done in the district of Leontini? Although formerly these lands of Campania and Leontini were considered part of the patrimony of the Roman people, and were productive of great revenue and very fertile. You gave your physician 3,000 acres. What would you have done if he had cured you? And 2,000 to your master of oratory. What would you have done if he had been able to make you eloquent? In public transactions, nothing is more authoritative than law. In private affairs, the most valid of all deeds is a will. Of the laws, some he abolished without giving the least notice. Others he gave notice of bills to abolish. Wills he annulled, though they have been at all times held sacred, even in the case of the very meanest of the citizens. As for the statues and pictures which Caesar bequeathed to the people, together with his gardens, those he carried away, some to the house which belonged to Pompeius, and some to Scipio's villa. Are you then diligent in doing honor to Caesar's memory? Do you love him even now that he is dead? What greater honor had he obtained than that of having a holy cushion, an image, a temple, and a priest? As then Jupiter and Mars and Quirinus have priests, so Marcus Antonius is the priest of the god Julius. Why then do you delay? Why are you not inaugurated? Choose a day. Select someone to inaugurate you. We are colleagues. No one will refuse. You detestable man, whether you are the priest of a tyrant or of a dead man. I ask you then whether you are ignorant what day this is. Are you ignorant that yesterday was the 4th day of the Roman games in the circus, and that you yourself submitted a motion to the people that a 5th day should be added besides, in honor of Caesar? Why are we not all clad in the praetexta? Why are we permitting the honor which by your law was appointed for Caesar to be deserted? Had you no objection to so holy a day being polluted by the addition of supplications, while you did not choose it to be so, by the addition of ceremonies connected with a sacred cushion? Either take away religion in every case, or preserve it in every case. Recollect then, O Marcus Antonius, that day on which you abolished the dictatorship. Set before you the joy of the Senate and people of Rome. Compare it with this infamous market held by you and by your friends, and then you will understand how great is the difference between praise and profit. But in truth, just as some people, through some disease which has blunted the senses, have no conception of the niceness of food, so men who are lustful, avaricious, and criminal have no taste for true glory. But if praise cannot allure you to act rightly, still cannot even fear turn you away from the most shameful actions? You are not afraid of the courts of justice. If it is because you are innocent, I praise you. If because you trust in your power of overbearing them by violence, are you ignorant of what that man has to fear, who on such an account as that does not fear the courts of justice? But if you are not afraid of brave men and illustrious citizens, because they are prevented from attacking you by your armed retinue, still, believe me, your own fellows will not long endure you. And what a life it is, day and night, to be fearing danger from one's own people! Unless, indeed, you have men who are bound to you by greater kindnesses than some of those men by whom he was slain were bound to Caesar, or unless there are points in which you can be compared with him. In that man were combined genius, method, memory, literature, prudence, deliberation, and industry. He had performed exploits in war, which, though calamitous for the republic, were nevertheless mighty deeds. Having for many years aimed at being a king, he had with great labor and much personal danger accomplished what he intended. He had conciliated the ignorant multitude by presents, by monuments, by largesse of food, and by banquets. He had bound his own party to him by rewards, his adversaries by the appearances of clemency. Why need I say much on such a subject? He had already brought a free city, partly by fear, partly by patience, into a habit of slavery. With him I can indeed compare you as to your desire to reign, but in all other respects you are in no degree to be compared to him. But from the many evils which by him have been burnt into the republic, there is still this good, that the Roman people has now learnt how much to believe everyone, to whom to trust itself, and against whom to guard. Do you never think on these things? And do you not understand that it is enough for brave men to have learnt how noble a thing it is as to the act, how grateful it is as to the benefit done, how glorious is to the fame acquired, to slay a tyrant? When men could not bear him, do you think they will bear you? Believe me, the time will come when men will race with one another to do this deed, and when no one will wait for the tardy arrival of an opportunity. Consider, I beg you, Marcus Antonius, do some time or other consider the republic. Think of the family of which you are born, not of the men with whom you are living. Be reconciled to the republic. How ever do you decide on your conduct? As to mine, I myself will declare what that shall be. I defended the republic as a young man. I will not abandon it now that I am old. I scorned the sword of Catiline. I will not quail before yours. No, I will rather cheerfully expose my own person, if the liberty of the city can be restored by my death. End of section 17.
Section 18 of the World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. His Oration over the Dead Body of Caesar, by Mark Antony. His Oration over the Dead Body of Caesar, 44 BC. Footnote: delivered in the Roman Forum, 44 BC, reported by Dion Cassius in his History of Rome, translated by the late Herbert Baldwin Porter, professor of Greek, Lehigh University, Troy, New York, Puffrett's Book Company, 1905, and here printed by permission. As to the authenticity of this speech, it may be noted that Freud, in his Caesar, prints a long passage from it, with a footnote saying Dion Cassius can hardly have himself composed the version which he gives, for he calls the speech as ill-timed as it was brilliant. End of footnote. Born about 83 before Christ, died in 30, quaestor in 52, tribune in 50, acted with Caesar in the Civil War, commanding his left wing at Pharsalia, consul in 44, fled from Rome after Caesar's death, formed with Octavian and Lepidus the second triumvirate in 43, defeated Brutus and Cassius at Philippi in 42, followed Cleopatra to Asia in 41, again triumvir in 40 and 37, unsuccessful in an expedition to Parthia, defeated by Octavian at Actium in 31, fled to Egypt and committed suicide. If this man had died as a private citizen, quaeris, and I had happened to be a private citizen, I should not have needed many words, nor have rehearsed all his achievements, but after making a few remarks about his family, his education, and his character, and possibly mentioning some of his services to the state, I should have been satisfied, and should have refrained from becoming wearisome to those not related to him. But since this man has perished while holding the highest position among you, and I have received and hold the second, it is requisite that I should deliver a twofold address, one as the man set down as his heir, and the other in my capacity as magistrate. I must not omit anything that ought to be said, but speak what the whole people would have chanted with one tongue if they could have obtained one voice. I am well aware that it is difficult to hit your precise sentiments. Especially is it no easy task to treat matters of such magnitude. What speech could equal the greatness of deeds? And you, whose minds are insatiable because of the facts that you know already, will not prove lenient judges of my efforts. If the speech were being made among men ignorant of the subject, it would be very easy to content them, for they would be startled by such great deeds. But as the matter stands, through your familiarity with the events, it is inevitable that everything that shall be said will be thought less than the reality. Outsiders, even if through jealousy they should distrust it, yet for that very reason must deem each statement they hear strong enough. But your gathering, influenced by goodwill, must inevitably prove impossible to satisfy. You yourselves have profited most by Caesar's virtues, and you demand his praises not half-heartedly, as if he were no relation, but out of deep affection, as one of your very own. I shall strive, therefore, to meet your wishes to the fullest extent, and I feel sure that you will not criticize too closely my command of words or conception of the subject, but will, out of your kindness of heart, make up whatever is lacking in that respect. I shall speak first about his lineage, though not because it is very brilliant. Yet this, too, has considerable bearing on the nature of excellence, that a man should have become good, not through force of circumstances, but by inherent power. Those not born of noble parents may disguise themselves as honest men, but may also some day be convicted of their base origin by innate qualities. Those, however, who possess the seed of honesty, descending through a long line of ancestors, cannot possibly help having an excellence which is of spontaneous growth and permanent. Still, I do not now praise Caesar, chiefly because he was sprung from many noblemen of recent times and kings and gods of ancient days, but because in the first place he was a kinsman of our whole city. We were founded by the men that were his ancestors, and secondly because he not only confirmed the renown of his forefathers, who were believed by virtue to have attained divinity, but actually increased it. If any person disputed formerly the possibility of Aeneas ever having been born of Venus, he may now believe it. The gods in past times have been reported as possessing some unworthy children, but no one could deem this man unworthy to have had gods for his ancestors. Aeneas himself became king, as likewise some of his descendants. This man proved himself so much superior to them that whereas they were monarchs of Lavinium and Alba, he refused to become king of Rome, and whereas they laid the foundation of our city, he raised it to such heights that among other services he established colonies greater than the cities over which they ruled. Such, then, is the state of his family, that he passed through a childhood and education corresponding to the dignity of his noble birth. How could one feel better assured than by the certain proofs that his deeds afford? When a man possesses conspicuously a body that is most enduring and a soul that is most steadfast in the face of all contingencies alike of peace and war, is it not inevitable that he must have been reared in the best possible way? And I tell you, it is difficult for any man surpassingly beautiful to show himself most enduring, and difficult for one who is strong in body to attain great prudence, but most difficult of all for the same man to shine both in words and in deeds. Stating only the truth, therefore, I affirm that this Caesar was at the same time most able in body and most amiable in spirit. He enjoyed a wonderful natural talent, and had been scrupulously trained in every kind of education, which always enabled him, not unnaturally, to comprehend everything that was needed with the greatest keenness, to interpret the need most plausibly, and to arrange and administer matters most prudently. No shifting of a favorable situation could come upon him so suddenly as to catch him off his guard, nor did a secret delay, no matter how long the postponement, escape his notice. He decided always with regard to every crisis before he came in contact with it, and was prepared beforehand for every contingency that could happen to him. He understood well how to discern sharply what was concealed, to dissimulate what was evident in such a way as to inspire confidence, to pretend to know what was obscure, to conceal what he knew, to adapt occasions to one another, and to give an account of them, and furthermore to accomplish and cover successfully in detail the ground of every enterprise. A proof of this is that in his private affairs he showed himself at once an excellent manager and very liberal, being careful to keep permanently what he inherited, but lavish in spending with an unsparing hand what he gained, and for all his relatives, except the most impious, he possessed a strong affection. He did not neglect any of them in misfortune, nor did he envy them in good fortune, but he helped the latter to increase their previous property and made up the deficiencies for the former, giving some money, some lands, some offices, some priesthoods. Again, he was wonderfully attached to his friends and other associates. He never scorned or insulted any of them, but while courteous to all alike, he rewarded many times over those who assisted him in any project, and won the devotion of the rest by benefits, not bowing to any one of brilliant position, nor humiliating any one who was bettering himself, but as if he himself were being exalted through all their successes and acquiring strength and adornment. He took delight in making the largest number equal with himself. While he behaved thus toward his friends and acquaintances, he did not show himself cruel or inexorable even to his enemies. But many of those who had come into collision with him personally he let off scot-free, and many who had actually made war against him he released, giving some of them honors and offices. To this degree was he in every way inclined to right conduct, and not only had no baseness in his own making, but would not believe that it was found in anybody else. Since I have reached these statements, I will begin to speak about his public services. If he had lived a quiet existence, perhaps his excellence would never have come to light. But as it was, by being raised to the highest position and becoming the greatest not only of his contemporaries, but of all the rest who had ever wielded any influence, he displayed it more conspicuously. For nearly all his predecessors, this supreme authority had served only to reveal their defects, but him it made luminous. Through the greatness of his excellence, he undertook correspondingly great deeds, and was found to be a match for them. He alone of men, after obtaining for himself so great good fortune as a result of true worth, neither disgraced it nor treated it wantonly. The brilliant successes which he regularly achieved on his campaigns, and the high-mindedness he showed in everyday duties, I shall pass over, although they are so great that for any other man they would constitute sufficient praise. But in view of the distinction of his subsequent deeds, I shall seem to be dealing with small matters if I rehearse them all with exactness. I shall only mention his achievements while ruling over you. Even all of these, however, I shall not relate with minute scrupulousness. I could not possibly give them adequate treatment, and I should cause you excessive weariness, particularly since you already know them. First of all, this man was praetor in Spain, and finding it secretly hostile, did not allow the inhabitants, under the protection of the name of peace, to develop into foes, nor chose to spend the period of his governorship in quiet rather than to effect what was for the advantage of the nation. Hence, since they would not agree to alter their sentiments, he brought them to their senses without their consent, and in doing so, so far surpassed the man who had previously won glory against them, as keeping a thing is more difficult than acquiring it, and reducing men to a condition where they can never again become rebellious is more profitable than rendering them subject in the first place, while their power is still undiminished. That is the reason you voted him a triumph for this, and gave him at once the office of consul. As a result of your decree, it became most plainly evident that he had waged war not for his own desires or glory, but was preparing for the future. The celebration of the triumph he waived on account of pressing business, and after thanking you for the honor, he was satisfied with merely that to secure his glory and enter upon the consulship. Now all his administrative acts in this city during the discharge of that office would be verily countless to name. And as soon as he had left it and been sent to conduct war against the Gauls, notice how many and how great were his achievements there. So far from causing grievances to the allies, he even went to their assistance, because he was not suspicious at all of them, and further saw that they were wronged. But his foes, both those dwelling near the friendly tribes and all the rest that inhabited Gaul, he subjugated, acquiring at one time vast stretches of territory, and at another unnumbered cities, of which we knew not even the names before. All this, moreover, he accomplished so quickly, though he had received neither a competent force nor sufficient money from you, that before any of you knew that he was at war he had conquered, and he settled affairs on such a firm basis that as a result Celtica and Britain felt his footstep. And now is that Gaul enslaved which sent against us the Ambrones and the Cimbri, and is entirely cultivated like Italy itself. Ships traverse not only the Rhone or the Arar, but the Mosa, the Liger, the very Rhine, and the very ocean, places of which we had not even heard the titles to lead us to think that they existed, were likewise subdued for us. The formerly unknown he made accessible, the formerly unexplored navigable, by his greatness of purpose and greatness of accomplishment. And had not certain persons out of envy formed a faction against him, or rather us, and forced him to return here before the proper time, he would certainly have subdued Britain entire, together with the remaining islands surrounding it, and all of Celtica to the Arctic Ocean, so that we should have had as borders not land or people for the future, but air and the outer sea. For these reasons you also, seeing the greatness of his mind and his deeds and good fortune, assigned him the right to hold office a very long time, a privilege which from the hour that we became a democracy has belonged to no other man. I mean holding the leadership during 8 whole years in succession. This shows that you thought him to be really winning all those conquests for you, and never entertained the suspicion that he would strengthen himself to your hurt. No, you desired that he should spend in those regions as long a time as possible. He was prevented, however, by those who regarded the government as no longer a public but their own private possession, from subjugating the remaining countries, and you were kept from becoming lords of them all. These men, making an ill use of the opportunity given them by his being occupied, ventured upon many impious projects, so that you came to require his aid. Therefore, abandoning the victories within his grasp, he quickly brought you assistance, freed all Italy from the dangers in which it had become involved, and furthermore won back Spain, which had been estranged. Then he saw Pompey, who had abandoned his fatherland and was setting up a kingdom of his own in Macedonia, transferring thither all your possessions, equipping your subjects against you, and using against you money of your own. So at first he wished to persuade Pompey somehow to stop and change his course, and receive the greatest pledges that he should again attain a fair and equal position with him. And he found himself unable in any way to effect this, for Pompey burst all restraints, even the relationship that existed between himself and Caesar, and chose to fight against you. Then at last he was compelled to begin a civil war. And what need is there of telling you how daringly he sailed against him in spite of the winter, or how boldly he assailed him, though Pompey held all the strong positions there, or how bravely he vanquished him, though much inferior in number of soldiers? If a man wished to examine each feature in detail, he might show the renowned Pompey to have been a child, so completely was he out-generated at every point. But this I will omit, for Caesar himself likewise never took any pride in it, but he accepted it as a dispensation of destiny, repugnant to him personally. When heaven had most justly decided the issue of the battle, what man of those then captured for the first time did he put to death? Whom, rather, did he not honor? Not alone senators or knights, or citizens in general, but also allies and subjects. No one of them either died a violent death, or was made defendant in court. No individual, no king, no tribe, no city. On the contrary, some arrayed themselves on his side, and others at least obtained immunity with honor, so that then all lamented the man that had been lost. Such exceeding humanity did he show that he praised those who had cooperated with Pompey, and allowed them to keep everything the latter had given them, but hated Pharnaces and Orodes, because the friends of the vanquished they had not assisted him. It was chiefly for this reason that he not long after waged war on Pharnaces, and was preparing to conduct a campaign against Orodes. He certainly would have spared even Pompey himself if he had captured him alive. A proof of this is that he did not pursue him at once, but allowed him to flee at his leisure. Also he has grieved to hear of Pompey's death, and did not praise his murderers, but put them to death for it soon after, and even destroyed besides Ptolemy himself, though a child, because he had allowed his benefactor to perish. How after this he brought Egypt to terms, and how much money he conveyed to you from there, it would be superfluous to relate. And when he made his campaign against Pharnaces, who already held considerable of Pontus and Armenia, he was on the same day reported to the rebel as approaching him, was seen confronting him, engaged in conflict with him, and conquered him. This better than anything else established the truth of the assertion that he had not become weaker in Alexandria, and had not delayed there out of voluptuousness. For how could he have won that victory so easily without employing a great store of insight and great force? When now Pharnaces had fled, he was preparing to conduct a campaign at once against the Parthian. But as certain quarrels were taking place there, he withdrew rather unwillingly, but settled this dispute too, so that no one would believe there had been a disturbance. Not a soul was killed or exiled or even dishonored in any way as a result of that trouble, not because many might not justly have been punished, but because he thought it right, while destroying enemies unsparingly, to preserve citizens, even if they were poor stuff. Therefore, by his bravery, he overcame foreigners in war, but out of his humanity kept unharmed the seditious citizens, although many of them by their acts had often shown themselves unworthy of this favor. The same policy he followed again both in Africa and Spain, releasing all who had not before been captured and been made recipients of his mercy, to grant their lives invariably to such as frequently plotted against him. He deemed folly, not humanity. On the other hand, he thought it quite the duty of a manly man to pardon opponents on the occasion of their first errors, and not to keep an exhonorable anger. Yes, and to assign honors to them. But if they clung to their original curse, to get rid of them. Yet why did I say this? Many of them also he preserved by allowing all his associates and those who had helped him conquer to save, one each, the life of a captive. Moreover, that he did all this from inherent excellence, and not from pretense, or to gather any advantage, as others in large numbers have displayed humanness. The greatest evidence is that everywhere and under all circumstances he showed himself the same. Anger did not brutalize him, nor good fortune corrupt him. Power did not alter, nor authority change him. Yet it is very difficult, when tested in so many enterprises of such a scope, and following one another in quick succession at a time when one has been successful in some, is still engaged in conducting others, and only suspects the existence of others, to prove equally efficient on all occasions, and to refrain from wishing to do anything harsh or frightful, if not out of vengeance for the past, at least as a measure of safeguard for the future. This, then, is enough to prove his excellence. He was so truly a scion of gods that he understood but one thing: to save those that could be saved. But if you want more evidence, it lies in this: that he took care to have those who warred against him chastised by no other hands than his own, and that he won back those who in former times had slipped away. He had amnesty granted to all who had been followers of Lepidus and Sertorius, and next arranged that safety should be afforded all the survivors among those proscribed by Sulla. Somewhat later he brought them home from exile, and bestowed honors and offices upon the children of all who had been slain by that tyrant. Greatest of all, he burned absolutely every one of the letters containing secret information that was found in the tent of either Pompey or Scipio, not reading or noticing any portion of them, in order that no one else might derive from them the power to play the rogue. That this was not only what he said, but what he did, his acts show clearly. No one, as a result of those letters, was even frightened, let alone suffering any great calamity. And no one knows those who escaped this danger except the men themselves. This is most astonishing, and has nothing to surpass it, that they were spared before being accused, and saved before encountering danger, and that not even he who saved their lives learned who it was he pitied. For these and all his other acts of law making and reconstruction, great in themselves, but likely to be deemed small in comparison with those others into which one cannot enter minutely, you loved him as a father, and cherished him as a benefactor. You gloried him with such honors as you bestowed on no one else, and desired him to be continual head of the city and of the whole domain. You did not dispute at all about titles, but applied them all to him as being still less than his merits, with the purpose that whatever was lacking in each one of them of what was considered a proper expression of the most complete honor and authority might be made up by what the rest contributed. Therefore, as regards the gods, he was appointed high priest; as regards us, consul; as regards the soldiers, imperator; and as regards the enemy, dictator. But why do I enumerate these details, when in one phrase you called him father of his country, not to mention the rest of his titles? Yet this father, this high priest, this inviolable being, hero, god, is dead. Alas, dead not by the violence of some disease, nor exhausted by old age, nor wounded abroad somewhere in some war, nor snatched away irresistibly by some supernatural force, but plotted against here within the walls, the man that safely led an army into Britain, ambushed in this city, the man who had increased its circuit, struck down in the Senate house, the man that had reared another such edifice at his own charge, unarmed, the brave warrior, defenseless, the promoter of peace, the judge beside the court of justice, the governor beside the seat of government, at the hands of the citizens, he whom none of the enemy had been able to kill even when he fell into the sea, at the hands of his comrades, he who had often taken pity on them. Where, Caesar, was your humanist? Where your inviolability? Where the laws? You enacted many laws to prevent anyone's being killed by personal foes. Yet see how mercilessly your friends killed you. And now slain you lie before us in that forum through which you, often crowned, led triumphal marches. Wounded unto death, you have been cast down upon that rostra, from which you often addressed the people. Woe for the blood bespattered locks of grey! Alas for the rent robe, which you assumed, it seems, only to the end that you might be slain in it. End of section 18.
Section 19 of The World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Aaron Carlo in San Clemente, California. The World's Famous Orations, Volume 2, An Exhortation to Conspiracy, by Cataline. Footnote: delivered in 68 BC in an apartment in his own house. Reported by Sallust, translated by John S. Watson. End of footnote. Born in 106 BC, died in 62. Elected praetor in 68, governor of Africa in 67, a candidate for consul in 66, but disqualified on account of maladministration in Africa. Then organized the famous conspiracy, slain in battle in 62. If your courage and fidelity had not been sufficiently proved by me, this favorable opportunity would have occurred to no purpose. Mighty hopes, absolute power would in vain be within our grasp. Nor should I, depending on irresolution or fickle-mindedness, pursue contingencies instead of certainties. But, as I have on many remarkable occasions experienced your bravery and attachment to me, I have ventured to engage in a most important and glorious enterprise. I am aware, too, that whatever advantages or evils affect you, the same affect me, and to have the same desires and the same aversions is assuredly a firm bond of friendship. What I have been meditating you have already heard separately, but my ardor for action is daily more and more excited when I consider what our future condition of life must be, unless we ourselves assert our claims to liberty. For since the government has fallen under the power and jurisdiction of a few, kings and princes have constantly been their tributaries. Nations and states have paid them taxes, but all the rest of us, however brave and worthy, whether noble or plebeian, have been regarded as a mere mob, without interest or authority, and subject to those to whom, if the state were in a sound condition, we should be a terror. Hence, all influence, power, honor, and wealth are in their hands, where they dispose of them. To us, they have left only insults, dangers, prosecutions, and poverty. To such indignities, O bravest of men, how long will you submit? Is it not better to die in a glorious attempt than, after having been the sport of other men's insolence, to resign a wretched and degraded existence with ignominy? But success, I call gods and men to witness, is in our own hands. Our years are fresh, our spirit is unbroken. Among our oppressors, on the contrary, through age and wealth, a general debility has been produced. We have, therefore, only to make a beginning. The course of events will accomplish the rest. Who in the world, indeed, that has the feelings of a man, can endure that they should have a superfluity of riches to squander in building over seas and leveling mountains, and that means should be wanting to us, even for the necessities of life, that they should join together 2 houses or more, and that we should not have a hearth to call our own? They, though they purchase pictures, statues, and embossed plate, though they pull down new buildings and erect others, and lavish and abuse their wealth in every possible method, yet cannot, with the utmost efforts of caprice, exhaust it. But for us, there is poverty at home, debts abroad. Our present circumstances are bad, our prospects much worse. And what, in a word, have we left? But a miserable existence. Will you not, then, awake to action? Behold that liberty for which you have so often wished, with wealth, honor, and glory, are set before your eyes. All these prizes fortune offers to the victorious. Let the enterprise itself, then, let the opportunity, let your poverty, your dangers, and the glorious spoils of war animate you far more than my words. Use me either as your leader or your fellow soldier. Neither my heart nor my hand shall be wanting to you. These objects I hope to effect in concert with you in character of consul, unless, indeed, my expectation deceives me, and you prefer to be slaves rather than masters.
Footnote. Sallust says that the auditors, surrounded with numberless evils but without any resources or hopes of good, inquired of Catiline what benefits they might expect from taking up arms, and that he promised them the abolition of their debts, a proscription of the wealthy citizens, office, sacerdotal dignities, plunder, and all other gratifications which war and the license of conqueror can afford. Another interesting item in Sallust about this speech is the following. There were some at the time who said that Catiline, having ended his speech, and wishing to bind his accomplices in guilt by an oath, handed round among them in goblets the blood of a human body mixed with wine, and that when all, after an imprecation, had tasted of it, as is usual in sacred rites, he disclosed his designs, and they asserted that he did this in order that they might be more closely attached to one another, by being mutually conscious of such an atrocity. Sallust adds, "The evidence which I have obtained in support of this charge is not at all in proportion to its magnitude." End of footnote. End of section 19. Recording by Aaron Carlo in San Clemente, California.
Section 20 of the World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. To his army before his defeat in battle by Catiline. Footnote. Delivered in the field near Pistoria, whence he had hoped to escape into Gaul in 63 B.C. Reported by Sallust. Translated by John S. Watson. 63 B.C. I am well aware, soldiers, that words cannot inspire courage, and that a spiritless army cannot be rendered active, or a timid army valiant, by the speech of its commander. Whatever courage is in the heart of a man, whether from nature or from habit, so much will be shown by him in the field, and on him whom neither glory nor danger can move, exhortation is bestowed in vain, for the terror in his breast stops his ears. I have called you together, however, to give you a few instructions, and to explain to you at the same time my reasons for the course which I have adopted. You all know, soldiers, how severe a penalty the inactivity and cowardice of Lentulus has brought upon himself and us, and how, while waiting for reinforcements from the city, I was unable to march into Gaul. In what situation our affairs now are, you all understand as well as myself. Two armies of the enemy, one on the side of Rome and the other on that of Gaul, oppose our progress, while the want of corn and of other necessaries prevents us from remaining, however strongly we may desire to remain, in our present position. Whithersoever we would go, we must open a passage with our swords. I conjure you, therefore, to maintain a brave and resolute spirit, and to remember, when you advance to battle, that on your own right hands depend riches, honor, and glory, with the enjoyment of your liberty and of your country. If we conquer, all will be safe. We shall have provisions in abundance, and the colonies and corporate towns will open their gates to us. But if we lose the victory through want of courage, those same places will turn against us, for neither place nor friend will protect him whom his arms have not protected. Besides, soldiers, the same exigency does not press upon our adversaries as presses upon us. We fight for our country, for our liberty, for our life. They contend for what but little concerns them, the power of a small party. Attack them, therefore, with so much the greater confidence, and call to mind your achievements of old. We might, with the utmost ignominy, have passed the rest of our days in exile. Some of you, after losing your property, might have waited at Rome for assistance from others. But because such a life to men of spirit was disgusting and unendurable, you received upon your present course. If you wish to quit it, you must exert all your resolution, for none but conquerors have exchanged war for peace. To hope for safety in flight when you have turned away from the enemy the arms by which the body is defended is indeed madness. In battle, those who are most afraid are always in most danger, but courage is equivalent to a rampart. When I contemplate you, soldiers, and when I consider your past exploits, a strong hope of victory animates me. Your spirit, your age, your valor give me confidence, to say nothing of necessity, which makes even cowards brave. To prevent the numbers of the enemy from surrounding us, our confined situation is sufficient. But should fortune be unjust to your valor, take care not to lose your lives unavenged. Take care not to be taken and butchered like cattle, rather than fighting like men, to leave to your enemies a bloody and mournful victory. End of section 20. Recording by Philip Gould.
Section 21 of the World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. On the Punishment of the Catiline Conspirators, by Julius Caesar. Footnote. Delivered in the Roman Senate in 68 B.C. Reported by Sallust. Translated by John S. Watson. Of this speech, the only one by Caesar now extant, Froude says it, quote, was not an imaginary sketch of what Sallust supposed him likely to have said, but the version generally received of what he actually did say, and the most important passages of it are certainly authentic. End quote. End footnote. 68 B.C. Born in 100 B.C., died in 44. Pontifex Maximus in 63, Consul in 60, Triumvir in 60, conquered Gaul, Britain, etc. in 58 to 51, master of Italy in 49, defeated Pompey at Pharsalia in 48, dictator in 48, conducted Egyptian and African campaigns in 48 to 46, reformed the calendar in 46, made Imperator in 45, assassinated in 44. It becomes all men, conscript fathers, who deliberate on dubious matters, to be influenced neither by hatred, affection, anger, nor pity. The mind, when such feelings obstruct its view, cannot easily see what is right, nor has any human being consulted at the same moment his passions and his interest. When the mind is freely exerted, its reasoning is sound. but passion, if it gain possession of it, becomes its tyrant, and reason is powerless. I could easily mention, conscript fathers, numerous examples of kings and nations who, swayed by resentment or compassion, have adopted injudicious courses of conduct. But I had rather speak of those instances in which our ancestors, in opposition to the impulse of passion, acted with wisdom and sound policy. In the Macedonian War, which we carried on against King Perses, the great and powerful state of Rhodes, which had risen by the aid of the Roman people, was faithless and hostile to us. Yet when the war was ended, and the conduct of the Rhodians was taken into consideration, our forefathers left them unmolested, lest any should say that the war was made upon them for the sake of seizing their wealth, rather than of punishing their faithlessness. Throughout the Punic wars, too, though the Carthaginians, both during peace and in suspension of arms, were guilty of many acts of injustice, yet our ancestors never took occasion to retaliate, but considered rather what was worthy of themselves than what might justly be inflicted on their enemies. Similar caution, conscript fathers, is to be observed by yourselves, that the guilt of Lentulus and the other conspirators may not have greater weight with you than your own dignity, and that you may not regard your indignation more than your character. If, indeed, a punishment adequate to their crimes be discovered, I consent to extraordinary measures. But if the enormity of their crime exceeds whatever can be devised, I think that we should inflict only such penalties as the laws have provided. Most of those who have given their opinions before me have deplored, in studied and impressive language, the sad fate that threatens the Republic. They have recounted the barbarities of war and the afflictions that would fall on the vanquished. They have told us that maidens would be dishonored and youths abused, that children would be torn from the embraces of their parents, that matrons would be subjected to the pleasure of the conquerors, that temples and dwelling houses would be plundered, that massacres and fires would follow, and that every place would be filled with arms, corpses, blood, and lamentation. But to what end, in the name of the eternal gods, was such eloquence directed? Was it intended to render you indignant at the conspiracy? A speech, no doubt, will inflame him whom so frightful and monstrous a reality has not provoked. Far from it. For to no man does evil directed against himself appear a light matter. Many, on the contrary, have felt it more seriously than was right. But to different persons, conscript fathers, different degrees of license are allowed. If those who pass a life sunk in obscurity commit any error through excessive anger, few will become aware of it, for their fame is as limited as their fortune. But of those who live invested with extensive power, and in an exalted station, the whole world knows the proceedings. Thus, in the highest position there is the least liberty of action, and it becomes us to indulge neither partiality nor aversion, but least of all animosity. For what in others is called resentment, is in the powerful termed violence and cruelty. I am indeed of opinion, conscript fathers, that the utmost degree of torture is inadequate to punish their crime, but the generality of mankind dwell on that which happens last, and in the case of malefactors forget their guilt, and talk only of their punishment, should that punishment have been inordinately severe. I feel assured, too, that Decimus Silenus, a man of spirit and resolution, made the suggestions which he offered from zeal for the state, and that he had no view, in so important a matter, to favor or to enmity. Such I know to be his character, and such his discretion. Yet his proposal appears to me, I will not say cruel, for what can be cruel that is directed against such characters, but foreign to our policy. For assuredly, Silenus, either your fears or their treason must have induced you, a consul elect, to propose this new kind of punishment. Of fear it is unnecessary to speak, when by the prompt activity of that distinguished man our consul, such numerous forces are under arms. And as to the punishment, we may say what is indeed the truth, that in trouble and distress, death is a relief from suffering, and not a torment, that it puts an end to all human woes, and that beyond it there is no place either for sorrow or joy. But why, in the name of the immortal gods, did you not add to your proposal, Silenus, that, before they were put to death, they should be punished with a scourge? Was it because the Pausian law forbids it? Footnote: the Pausian law, enacted AUC 454, provided that no one should bind, scourge, or kill a Roman citizen. End footnote. But other laws forbid condemned citizens to be deprived of life, and allow them to go into exile. Or was it because scourging is a severer penalty than death? Yet what can be too severe, or too harsh, toward men convicted of such an offence? But if scourging be a milder punishment than death, how is it consistent to observe the law as to the smaller point, when you disregard it as to the greater? But who, it may be asked, will blame any severity that shall be decreed against these parricides of their country? I answer, that time, the course of events, and fortune, whose caprice governs nations, may blame it. Whatever shall fall on the traitors will fall on them justly. But it is for you, conscript fathers, to consider well what you resolve to inflict on others. All precedents, productive of evil effects, have had their origin from what was good. But when a government passes into the hands of the ignorant or unprincipled, any new example of severity inflicted on deserving and suitable objects is extended to those that are improper and undeserving of it. The Lacedaemonians, when they had conquered the Athenians, appointed 30 men to govern their state. These 30 began their administration by putting to death, even without a trial, all who were notoriously wicked or publicly detestable. Acts at which the people rejoiced, and extolled their justice. But afterward, when their lawless power gradually increased, they proceeded at their pleasure to kill the good and the bad indiscriminately, and to strike terror into all, and thus the state, overpowered and enslaved, paid a heavy penalty for its imprudent exaltation. Within our own memory, too, when the victorious Sulla ordered Damasippus and others of similar character, who had risen by distressing their country, to be put to death, who did not commend the proceeding? All exclaimed that wicked and factious men, who had troubled the state with their seditious practices, had justly forfeited their lives. Yet this proceeding was the commencement of great bloodshed. For whenever any one coveted the mansion or villa, or even the plate or apparel of another, he exerted his influence to have him numbered among the proscribed. Thus they, to whom the death of Damasippus had been a subject of joy, were soon after dragged to death themselves, nor was there any cessation of slaughter until Sulla had glutted all his partisans with riches. Such excesses, indeed, I do not fear from Marcus Tullius, or in these times. But in a large state there arise many men of various dispositions. At some other period, and under another consul, who, like the present, may have an army at his command, some false accusation may be credited as true. And when, with our example for a precedent, the consul shall have drawn the sword on the authority of the Senate, who shall stay its progress, or moderate its fury? Our ancestors, conscript fathers, were never deficient in conduct or courage, nor did pride prevent them from imitating the customs of other nations, if they appeared deserving of regard. Their armor, their weapons of war, they borrowed from the Samnites; their ensigns of authority, for the most part, from the Etrurians; and, in short, whatever appeared eligible to them, whether among allies or among enemies, they adopted at home with the greatest readiness, being more inclined to emulate merit than to be jealous of it, but at the same time adopting a practice from Greece. They punished their citizens with the scourge, and inflicted capital punishment on such as were condemned. When the republic, however, became powerful, and faction grew strong from the vast number of citizens, men began to involve the innocent in condemnation, and other like abuses were practiced. And it was then that the Porcian and other laws were provided, by which condemned citizens were allowed to go into exile. This lenity of our ancestors, conscript fathers, I regard as a very strong reason why we should not adopt any new measures of severity. For assuredly there was greater merit and wisdom in those who raised so mighty an empire from humble means, than in us who can scarcely preserve what they so honorably acquired. Am I of opinion, then, you will ask, that the conspirators should be set free, and that the army of Catiline should be thus increased? Far from it. My recommendation is, that their property be confiscated, and that they themselves be kept in custody in such of the municipal towns as are best able to bear the expense, that no one hereafter bring their case to the Senate, or speak on it to the people, and that the Senate now give their opinion that he who shall act contrary to this will act against the republic and the general safety. End of section 21. Section 22 of the World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. On the Punishment of the Catiline Conspirators, by Cato the Younger. Footnote. Delivered in the Roman Senate House soon after Caesar had spoken, in 63 B.C. Reported by Sallust. Translated by John S. Watson. End footnote. Born in 95 B.C., died in 46, served against Spartacus in 72, quaestor in 65, praetor in 54, served under Pompey against Caesar in 48, committed suicide in 46. My feelings, conscript fathers, are extremely different when I contemplate our circumstances and dangers, and when I revolve in my mind the sentiments of some who have spoken before me. Those speakers, as it seems to me, have considered only how to punish the traitors who have raised war against their country, their parents, their altars, and their homes, but the state of affairs warns us rather to secure ourselves against them, than to take counsel as to what sentence we should pass upon them. Other crimes you may punish after they have been committed, but as to this, unless you prevent its commission, you will, when it has once taken effect, in vain appeal to justice. When the city is taken, no power is left to the vanquished. But in the name of the immortal gods, I call upon you, who have always valued your mansions and villas, your statues and pictures, at a higher price than the welfare of your country, if you wish to preserve those possessions, of whatever kind they are, to which you were attached, if you wish to secure quiet for the enjoyment of your pleasures, arouse yourselves and act in defense of your country. We are not now debating on the revenues, or on injuries done to our allies, but our liberty and our life is at stake. Often, conscript fathers, have I spoken at great length in this assembly. Often have I complained of the luxury and avarice of our citizens, and by that very means have incurred the displeasure of many. I, who never excused to myself or to my own conscience the commission of any fault, could not easily pardon the misconduct or indulge the licentiousness of others. But though you little regarded my remonstrances, yet the republic remained secure. Its own strength was proof against your remissness. The question, however, at present under discussion, is not whether we live in a good or bad state of morals, nor how great, nor how splendid the empire of the Roman people is, but whether these things around us, of whatever value they are to continue our own, or to fall with ourselves into the hands of the enemy. In such a case, does any one talk to me of gentleness and compassion? For some time past, it is true, we have lost the real names of things, for to lavish the property of others is called generosity, and audacity and wickedness is called heroism, and hence the state is reduced to the brink of ruin. But let those who thus misname things be liberal, since such is the practice, out of the property of our allies. Let them be merciful to the robbers of the treasury, but let them not lavish our blood, and while they spare a few criminals, bring destruction on all the guiltless. Caius Caesar, a short time ago, spoke in fair and elegant language before this assembly on the subject of life and death, considering as false, I suppose, what is told of the dead, that the bad, going a different way from the good, inhabit places gloomy, desolate, dreary, and full of horror. He accordingly proposed that the property of the conspirators should be confiscated, and themselves kept in custody in the municipal towns, fearing, it seems, that if they remained at Rome they might be rescued by their accomplices in the conspiracy, or by a hired mob, as if, forsooth, the mischievous and profligate were to be found only in the city, and not throughout the whole of Italy, or as if desperate attempts would not be more likely to succeed where there is less power to resist them. His proposal, therefore, if he fears any danger from them, is absurd. But if, amid such universal terror, he alone is free from alarm, it the more concerns me to fear for you and myself. Footnote. This is the famous passage in which Cato intimated that Caesar was in some manner allied with the conspirators. Be assured, then, that when you decide on the fate of Lentulus and the other prisoners, you at the same time determine that of the army of Catiline and of all the conspirators. The more spirit you display in your decision, the more will their confidence be diminished. But if they shall perceive you, in the smallest degree, irresolute, they will advance upon you with fury. Do not suppose that our ancestors, from so small a commencement, raised the republic to greatness merely by force of arms. If such had been the case, we should enjoy it in a most excellent condition, for of allies and citizens, as well as of arms and horses, we have a much greater abundance than they had. But there were other things which made them great, but which among us have no existence, such as industry at home, equitable government abroad, and minds impartial in council, uninfluenced by any immoral or improper feeling. Instead of such virtues, we have luxury and avarice, public distress and private superfluity. We extol wealth and yield to indolence. No distinction is made between good men and bad, and ambition usurps the honors due to virtue. Nor is this wonderful, since you study each his individual interest, and since at home you are slaves to pleasure, and here to money or favor, and hence it happens that an attack is made on the defenseless state. But on these subjects I shall say no more. Certain citizens of the highest rank have conspired to ruin their country. They are engaging the Gauls, the bitterest foes of the Roman name, to join in a war against us. The leader of the enemy is ready to make a descent upon us, and do you hesitate, even in such circumstances, how to treat armed incendiaries arrested within your walls? I advise you to have mercy upon them. They are young men who have been led astray by ambition. Send them away, even with arms in their hands. But such mercy and such clemency, if they turn those arms against you, will end in misery to yourselves. The case is assuredly dangerous, but you do not fear it. Yes, you fear it greatly, but hesitate how to act. Through weakness and want of spirit, waiting one for another, and trusting to the immortal gods, who have so often preserved your country in the greatest dangers. But the protection of the gods is not obtained by vows and effeminate supplications. It is by vigilance, activity, and prudent measures that general welfare is secured. When you are once resigned to sloth and indolence, it is in vain that you implore the gods, for they are then indignant and threaten vengeance. In the days of our forefathers, Titus Manlius Torquatus, during a war with the Gauls, ordered his own son to be put to death because he had fought with an enemy contrary to orders. That noble youth suffered for excess of bravery, and do you hesitate what sentence to pass on the most inhuman of traitors? Perhaps their former life is at variance with their present crime. Spare, then, the dignity of Lentulus, if he has ever spared his own honor or character, or had any regard for gods or for men. Pardon the youth of Cethegus, unless this be the second time that he has made war upon his country. As to Gabinius, Statilius, Caeparius, why should I make any remark upon them? Had they ever possessed the smallest share of discretion, they would never have engaged in such a plot against their country. In conclusion, conscript fathers, if there were time to amend an error, I might easily suffer you, since you disregard words, to be corrected by experience of consequences. But we are beset by dangers on all sides. Catiline with his army is ready to devour us, while there are other enemies within the walls and in the heart of the city, nor can any measures be taken or any plans arranged without their knowledge. The more necessary is it, therefore, to act with promptitude. What I advise, then, is this, that, since the state, by a treasonable combination of abandoned citizens, has been brought into the greatest peril, and since the conspirators have been convicted on the evidence of Titus Volturcius and the deputies of the Allobroges, and on their own confession, of having concerted massacres, conflagrations, and other horrible and cruel outrages against their fellow citizens and their country, punishment be inflicted, according to the usage of our ancestors, on the prisoners who have confessed their guilt, as on men convicted of capital crimes. Footnote. Sallust remarks of this speech, "When Cato had resumed his seat, all the senators of consular dignity, and a great part of the rest, applauded his opinion, and extolled his firmness of mind to the skies. With mutual reproaches, they accused one another of timidity, while Cato was regarded as the greatest and noblest of men, and a decree of the Senate was made as he had advised." Sallust's fine comparison of Caesar with Cato deserves a place here. "Their birth, age, and eloquence were nearly on an equality; their greatness of mind similar, as was also their reputation, though attained by different means. Caesar grew eminent by generosity and munificence, Cato by the integrity of his life. Caesar was esteemed for his humanity and benevolence; austereness had given dignity to Cato. Caesar acquired renown by giving, relieving, and pardoning; Cato by bestowing nothing. In Caesar there was a refuge for the unfortunate; in Cato destruction for the bad. In Caesar his easiness of temper was admired; in Cato his firmness. Caesar, in fine, had applied himself to a life of energy and activity. Intent upon the interests of his friends, he was neglectful of his own. He refused nothing to others that was worthy of acceptance, while for himself he desired great power, the command of an army, and a new war in which his talents might be displayed. But Cato's ambition was that of temperance, discretion, and, above all, of austerity. He did not contend in splendor with the rich, or in faction with the seditious, but with the brave in fortitude, with the modest in simplicity, with the temperate in abstinence. He was more desirous to be than to appear virtuous, and thus the less he courted popularity, the more it pursued him." End of section 22. Recording by Owen Cook in Potawatomi, ceded land. Section 23 of the World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. To His Mutinous Troops, by Germanicus. Begin footnote. Delivered at his camp on the Lower Rhine in 14 A.D., on hearing of the death of Augustus and the accession of Tiberius. Reported by Tacitus, the Revised Oxford Translation. End of footnote. Born in 15 B.C., died in 1980, son of Drusus and nephew of Tiberius, conducted 3 campaigns in Germany, died in Antioch, where he commanded the eastern provinces, believed to have been poisoned at the instance of Tiberius. To me nor wife nor son are dearer than my father, begin footnote, that is Tiberius, who by order of Augustus had adopted Germanicus, end of footnote, and the Commonwealth. But as for my father, he will be protected by his own majesty, and the Roman Empire by her other armies. As for my wife and children, whom for your glory I could freely sacrifice, I now remove them from your rage, that whatever dire purpose you may have conceived toward them, my blood alone may flow to satiate your fury, and that the murder of the great-grandson of Augustus, the murder of the daughter-in-law of Tiberius, may not augment your guilt. For during these last days, what has been unattempted by you? What unviolated? To this audience, what name shall I give? Can I call you soldiers? You who have beset with arms the son of your emperor, confined him in your trenches? Citizens, can I call you? You who have treated with such scorn the authority of the Senate? The obligations observed by enemies, the sacred persons and privileges of ambassadors, the laws of nations, you have violated. The deified Julius quelled a sedition in his army by a single word, by calling those who renounced their allegiance Quirites. The deified Augustus terrified the legion that fought Actium into submission by his countenance and look. If the armies in Syria and Spain contemn the authority of us, who, though not yet equal to them, are descended from them, we should think their behavior strange and base. Do you, the 1st and the 20th legions, the former enrolled by Tiberius himself, the other his constant companions in so many battles, and by him enriched with so many bounties, make this goodly return to your general, And shall I be the bearer of such tidings to him, while he receives none but joyful intelligence from the other provinces, that his own recruits, his own veterans, have not been satiated with exemption from service nor money? Must I tell him that here alone centurions are butchered, tribunes expelled, ambassadors imprisoned, the camp and the rivers polluted with blood, and that I drag out a precarious existence among men implacably set against me? Wherefore, on the first day that I addressed you, did you wrest from me that sword which I was on the point of plunging into my breast? Unwise in your friendship, preferably and with greater kindness did he act who proffered me a sword. At all events, I should have fallen ere I was privy to so many enormities committed by my army. You would have chosen a general who would leave my death unatoned for, but would avenge that of Varus and the 3 legions. And oh, may the gods never permit that the Belgians, although offering their services, shall reap the credit and renown of retrieving the Roman name, and of humbling the German nations. May thy spirit, O sainted Augustus, which is received into heaven, thy image, my father Drusus, and thy memory, with those same soldiers who even now are touched with a sense of duty and a desire of fame, wash out this stain, and turn the rage of citizens among themselves to the destruction of their enemies. And as for you, in whom I behold other countenances and altered minds, if you mean to render to the Senate its ambassadors, to your emperor the allegiance due to him, to me, my wife, and so to fly from the touch of guilt, set the disaffected by themselves. This will confirm your resolution to repent, and pledge you to fidelity. End of section 23. Recording by Owen Cook in Potawatomi Ceded Land. Section 24 of the World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. To His Friends When Dying, by Germanicus, 19 A.D. Begin footnote. Delivered in Antioch in 19 A.D. Reported by Tacitus. The Revised Oxford Translation. End of footnote. If I were dying in the course of nature, I should have just cause of complaint against the gods, for hurrying me from my parents, my children, and my country by a premature departure in the vigor of youth. But cut short in my career, as I am now, by the nefarious arts of Piso and Plancina, my dying prayer, which I deposit in your breasts, is that you would tell my father and my brother with what persecutions mangled, with what treachery circumvented, I end a life of consummate misery by a death the most revolting. Those who felt an interest in my prospects, or were connected with me by blood, nay, even those who envied me while I lived, will weep at the fate of him who, once renowned, and the survivor of so many wars, hath fallen by the dark devices of a woman. You will have an opportunity of complaining to the Senate and invoking the laws. To show respect for the dead with idle wailings is not the principal office of friends. It is to remember his dying wishes, to fulfill his last injunctions. Even strangers will lament Germanicus. You will avenge me, if it was myself and not my fortune that you caressed. Show the people of Rome my wife, the granddaughter of Augustus. Remind them of our 6 children. Compassion will wait on those who bring such charges, and the accused, if they pretend iniquitous mandates, will not be believed, or, if believed, not pardoned. End of section 24. Recording by Owen Cook in Potawatomi Ceded Land.
Section 25 of The World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Bill Mosley, Llano County, Texas, USA. The World's Famous Orations, Volume 2. Seneca. To Nero when in disfavor. 62 A.D. Born about 4 B.C., died in 65 A.D., senator under Caligula, banished by Claudius, and then recalled to undertake the education of Nero, at whose accession he virtually obtained direction of the government in cooperation with Burrus. Charged with complicity in the conspiracy of Piso, he committed suicide in obedience to the order of Nero. Delivered in Rome, reported by Tacitus, the Revised Oxford Translation. This is the 14th year, Caesar, since I was summoned to train you for your high destiny, and the 8th since your advancement to the empire. During the intervening period, you have showered such honors and riches upon me that nothing is wanting to complete my felicity but the capacity to use them with moderation. I shall quote great examples, such as are adapted not to my station and fortune, but to yours. Augustus, from whom you are the fourth in descent, granted to Marcus Agrippa leave to retreat to Mytilene, and to Caius Maecenas he allowed, even in Rome itself, a retirement as complete as in any foreign country. The former, his companion in the wars, the other long harassed at Rome with manifold occupations and public cares, both received rewards ample indeed, but proportioned to their services. For myself, what other claims upon your munificence have I been able to advance, except my literary attainments, nursed, so to speak, in the shades of retirement, and which have been rendered famous because I am believed to have assisted your early years in the acquisition of learning? A glorious reward for such a service! But you encompassed me with boundless favors, unnumbered riches, so that when I ruminate upon my situation, as I often do, I say to myself, can it be that I, the son of a knight, the native of a province, am ranked now among the chief men of Rome? Seneca's birthplace was Corduba, now Cordoba, Spain. Has my upstart name acquired splendor among the nobles of the land, and men who glory in a long line of honored ancestors? Where, then, is that philosophic spirit which professed to be satisfied with scanty supplies? Is it employed in adorning such gardens as these, in pacing majestically through these suburban retreats? Does it abound in estates so extensive as these, and in such immense sums put out at interest? One plea only occurs to my thoughts, that it becomes not me to oppose your bounties. But both of us have now filled up our measure. You of all that the bounty of a prince could confer upon his friend, I of all that a friend could accept from the bounty of his prince. Every addition can only furnish fresh materials for envy, which, indeed, like all other earthly things, lies prostrate beneath your towering greatness, but weighs heavily on me. I require assistance. Thus, in the same manner as, were I weary and faint with the toils of a warfare or a journey, I should implore indulgence, so in this journey of life, old as I am and unequal even to the lightest cares, since I am unable longer to sustain the weight of my own riches, I seek protection. Order your own stewards to undertake the direction of my fortune, and to annex it to your own, nor shall I by this plunge myself into poverty, but having surrendered those things by whose splendor I am exposed to the assaults of envy, all the time which is set apart for the care of gardens and villas, I shall apply once more to the cultivation of my mind. To you vigor remains more than enough, and the possession of imperial power established during so many years. We, your friends, who are more advanced in years, may take our turn of repose. This too will redound to your glory, that you had elevated to the highest posts those who could put up with a humble condition. End of section 25. Recording by Bill Moseley, Llano County, Texas, USA.